The story of how a group of South African men ended up in the Donbas region of the Ukraine keeps on getting new twists. Over the weekend, Nkosazana Zuma-Mncube, Jacob Zuma's eldest daughter, laid charges against her sister Duduzile Zuma-Sambudla, saying she and others had recruited the men on behalf of Russian interests. They were there ostensibly for bodyguard training. But Duduzile now claims that her co-conspirator, Blessing Khoza, duped her. She has submitted an affidavit to this effect to the police. In fact, she claims to have been Khoza's first victim as she traveled to Russia for this very same training. She also claims that she innocently shared the information about the training with family and friends. But her story raises more questions than it answers. Let's dive deeper into this saga. Hello everyone, welcome back to Joe Talks Politics. I am your host Joseph Mosia. Let's get right into this. According to Nkosazana, Duduzile together with Duduzile Zuma and Khoza played a key role in recruiting the men. These men are mostly from KwaZulu-Natal, aged between 20 and 39. They were allegedly lured with promises of lucrative work as security or bodyguards, but instead were handed over to a Russian mercenary group and ended up in the Donbas region of Ukraine, which, as many know, is a war zone.
So how long is it going to take? Because last we emergency.
How long will it take? Because our situation is dire here. It must happen in the next 2 to 3 days. These people here are saying they are tired of us, and in the next 4 to 5 days, they are moving us to the front lines in the war. They are saying your people back home don't want to take you back to.
But now the woman at the center of these allegations has turned around and claims she was herself a victim. She alleges that a man she did not know and had never had any previous interactions with approached her out of the blue to offer her paramilitary training in Russia. She used her own money and traveled to Russia for a paramilitary course recommended to her by a total stranger. I will believe that Ngandla chickens lay golden eggs before I buy this story. It is completely absurd. Let me narrate this story and you tell me what you think at the end. So some random guy in Russia needs to make some money. So he sits and plots his next move. And then he thinks, oh, I wonder where I can get hold of Duduzile Zuma's cell phone number. I'm sure she needs bodyguard training. We've never spoken before, but I can just tell. He works his magic and finally gets hold of this number. Hi Dudu, my name is Blessing Khoza. I'm a South African living in Russia, and I have just the type of training you need to guard the old man. My first words as Joseph Mosia to this Blessing guy would have been, Dear sir, please lose my number and never call me again. Not Dudu. Her reaction is, wow, what a godsend. When can I come over? And there she went, spent a month in Russia, a country in the midst of a bloody conflict, getting non-combat paramilitary training. Non-combat and paramilitary are oxymorons, if you ask me. This training is so good that she comes back home and tells her cousins and friends, guys, there is a cool non-combat course in Russia that I highly recommend. This guy that I don't really know that well, I think his name is Blessing. He is organizing the whole thing. And that is where she left it. These friends and relatives were so enthusiastic that they made their own travel plans and paid for all kinds of stuff, and off they went to Russia. Of all the people in the Republic of 60 million, why did Blessing think that lady accused of fomenting the 2021 riots, I am sure she needs training as a bodyguard? As I said earlier, I'm not really an expert on the height of tales, but I will tell you for free that this one is on the tall side. This story would have been funny if this same woman were not in the midst of a trial for allegedly fanning the flames of one of the most dangerous periods in the history of democratic South Africa. Those who follow her on X will remember her "We see you" tweets following her father's arrest. These tweets were not saying "we see you" and you should therefore stop what you are doing. She was inciting violence on social media, amplifying inflammatory and misleading content, and encouraging unrest. The allegation that she had helped facilitate the movement of men into a foreign war zone fits a pattern the state is arguing in court, that she uses influence, networks, and social media to mobilize people into dangerous, unlawful activity. If the 2021 charges relate to incitement, the Ukraine-Russia allegations relate to recruitment, misleading promises, and potentially trafficking for combat. That combination deepens the impression of someone who is repeatedly tied to destabilizing activities. Now, let us look into another issue connected to this. That is Russia. Why Russia? After all, KwaZulu-Natal alone has scores of private security companies that offer higher level training at a much cheaper rate than going abroad. What we know is that despite mobilizations, Russia still struggles with high casualty rates in the war with Ukraine. There is reluctance among its own citizens to serve, and there is a shrinking pool of trained soldiers. We also know that Russia has networks of recruiters for all kinds of nefarious purposes across Africa and South Africa. One of these was the luring of young people to that country with promises of lucrative job offers, only to have them end up in slave-like conditions. So the idea that vulnerable individuals are being enticed with false promises is quite feasible indeed. The leader of Umkhonto weSizwe party, Jacob Zuma, is an unapologetic admirer of the Kremlin and Putin. Like many others in South Africa, especially those who were in the liberation struggle, Zuma believes Putin's intentions and decisions on Ukraine were justified, especially in light of what Russia perceives as Western threats. He has argued that Russia was responding to NATO expansion and Western pressure, and said that Russia's actions exposed what he described as the hypocrisy of the West, which he accused of bullying tendencies to dominate other countries. We all remember how he frequently traveled to that country for what he said was medical treatment. Zuma, like many in the liberation movement, views Russia and the former Soviet Union as having supported the anti-apartheid struggle, and for some, this creates a loyalty or favorable view towards Russia even today. I, for one, would be very surprised if he did not have intimate knowledge of this saga. I might add that he would have been instrumental. I cannot see how Duduzile would have acted without his knowledge and approval. This also applies to other leaders in the MKP hierarchy. What did they know? And another question is, was Duduzile paid money to facilitate this? This is where things get murky. There's no confirmed public evidence yet that Duduzile personally pocketed money, but there are serious red flags and some claims. The Sunday Times reports that the men were made to pay for Russian boat, for Russian passports, and for plane tickets for the next recruits. Some family members claim that the recruits were forced to donate money. Duduzile is reported to have reassured the men that they would not be sent to the front line, claiming she had herself done bodyguard training in a combat zone, so they should trust her. The Sunday Times report also includes a disturbing voice note from Blessing Khoza, their commanding officer, berating the men for asking to go home. Some contracts they signed were allegedly infantry contracts written in Russian. So while we don't have public confirmation of a neatly documented large personal payment to Duduzile, there is credible reporting that money was exchanged or at least requested, and that these men say they were recruited under false pretenses. Whether that benefits her directly or others in the network is part of what the investigations are about. For her role in this mess, I believe that Duduzile Zuma-Sambudla and whoever she was working with should be held fully accountable. The police say they have registered an inquiry docket and that the case has been handed to the Crimes Against the State unit of the Hawks.
That the Hawks will be taking over the docket to investigate all the allegations that are being made. For now, we have not yet determined the charges because we are still investigating these allegations. So as soon as we have a preliminary investigation report, then we would be able to provide the necessary feedback as to what charges we are investigating against the three individuals.
The matter, however, has moved beyond the responsibility of an individual or group of individuals. The men have sent an SOS, and it is now up to the government to act. This case is not just a personal or family scandal. It raises big political and security questions for South Africa. If South African citizens are being recruited, willingly or not, into foreign wars, that's a serious national security risk. These men are young, many from KZN, likely vulnerable to promises of good jobs. This might expose a pattern of exploitation. How South Africa navigates repatriation could either set a precedent for how the country handles citizens lured into foreign wars or expose weaknesses in its diplomatic machinery. Here are some of the most pressing uncertainties. Did Duduzile or any of the named recruiters personally profit? Were they paid by a third party? What exactly did those Russian contracts say? What was the duration? What were their duties? What was the risk? And how much were they going to be paid? Did the men fully understand what they were signing up for? Were they misled or did they willingly go to fight? Duduzile likely played a central role not just in marketing the opportunity but in legitimizing it, telling the men that she had done similar training and offering reassurance which gave credibility to the mission. The risk of exploitation is high. Young, possibly impoverished men were enticed with prestige, training, and future work only to be thrust into an active war. From a national security perspective, this is dangerous. Foreign actors, possibly Russian, may be using South Africa as a recruitment ground which could strain South Africa's neutrality, diplomatic commitments, and legal responsibilities. This is not a sideshow. The story of these 20 men allegedly lured into war is a wake-up call about exploitation, about political opportunism, about national security, and about how South Africa's most vulnerable are being used in conflicts far from home. If the allegations are true, Duduzile Zuma-Sambudla and her associates didn't just make a terrible mistake. They may have orchestrated a system that traded on hope, loyalty, and ambition, and turned it into fighting in one of the world's most dangerous conflicts. And for us as citizens, the question is, What do we do when political actors use their influence not only for power, but to expose people to literal war? What do you think? Should MKP as a party be held responsible? Or is this just a few bad actors? And most importantly, how should the South African government act to bring these men home and ensure justice? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you are not yet a subscriber, please consider doing so. Don't forget to share and like this video. That is it from me, Joseph Mosia. See you in the next episode.